This is a follow-on recording from the Autosync tutorial about the use of Mosaic Pro in Imagine to create mosaics from rectified images that are processed in Autosync. So what I've done is open up the eWorkspace, or the new ribbon interface of ERDAS Imagine, and I'll be finding some rectified images from another folder and then dragging those into this particular workspace. So once I've opened up the Mosaic Pro subroutine. So to find Mosaic Pro, we go to the toolbox, and you'll see that under toolbox there's a mosaic icon. If you click on the arrow down the bottom of the icon, you'll get a submenu. Just select Mosaic Pro. You can also, if you've already dragged the images in, you can Mosaic Pro from the 2D view, which is this view down below it. There's also a Mosaic Express process, but we'll be using Mosaic Pro in this particular video tutorial. So I'll click on Mosaic Pro. Once I've done that, a few seconds later the Mosaic Pro window opens. And you'll see that there's a main viewing area. There's a space down the bottom for a table view of the files that you'll be dragging in, and a variety of other toolbar icons, which I'll explain as the time goes on. So let's just drag some images into this particular workspace. Now I've dragged 4 adjacent images in. I'll just grab a few more, because what I want to do is to be able to show you how the images will actually be able to have their internal boundaries removed, so that you get a nice smooth mosaic instead of having black film boundaries, film edge boundaries showing up. Okay, just a second. Okay, because those images I dragged in weren't all contiguous, I've had to remove some. So these are a group of contiguous images, and what I'll do is I'll highlight the table at the bottom of the screen by clicking on the first image and then holding down Shift and doing it the hard way. Okay, clicking on each individual image in the table at the bottom. Now we'll click on the visible column, and you'll see that once this icon in the toolbar, the display raster images icon, is also selected, I'll deselect that, I'll reselect that, and it will actually display the actual contents of the images that we've actually loaded. It's taking a few seconds to do it because it's actually there's quite a bit of data there. Okay, now these icons give you a fair bit of control about what's displayed, and they're also mimicked under the edit and view menus. This particular one will show you the edges of the area boundaries, so if we deselect that one, it'll turn off those boundaries. This one shows you the edges of the overall area, and these ones turn off or display the table at the bottom, and this one actually has the only the selected image is visible, and as at the moment none are selected, it'll make them all invisible. This one allows you to do your internal seam lines, and as I said, most of these, or these are all mimicked on the internal menus. You can bring images forward or backwards according to the way you'd like to display them using these particular tools. For example, if I wanted to bring this particular image here forward, I can use this particular icon to send that image forward, and you'll see it's come forward one and displaced another one. I can do it again to displace another one, or I can do it again and it should come forward of all of the images. And it's decided that it's not going to do that for me. Okay. For some reason I think this one's decided that it wants to be on top, so we might move that one back one. Maybe it likes to do it on a row basis. Anyway, but you can manipulate the frontness or backness, if you like, of the images according to what you want to display. Yeah, sometimes it takes several clicks to do that. So for example, this fellow can come forward. For some reason, you just see that it's moved it in the table at the bottom too. And we'll bring this one forward again. There we go, so it's now on top. Okay. You can move them back or forward, or you could send it to the back, or you can send it to the front with one click using these tools. I won't worry about these ones for just the time being. But what we'd like to do is obviously create a mosaic out of these images. As it is at the moment, it's cluttered by these internal lines and such. So we'll just turn off the edges of the image boundaries to clean up the display a little bit. And I'll use the menus to show how to do some of these things. First things first, if we look at our imagery sample options, what we want to do is set it to bilinear interpolation. So we'll apply that. It uses a different methodology of creating the output, which is a more accurate and a more evenly sampled process. If you want to look up bicubic or bilinear interpolation on Google, Google is your friend. Okay, let's have a look at, I think it's the seamline function. Now, if you look at seamline function, before you've actually told it that you want to use this seamlining tool, this is the dialog box that you'll get, which gives you some very basic functionality. We'll close that. We'll select this seamlining tool, and we'll select any one of these. I'd like to use the weighted seam lines, but depending on how you've got the images overlapping and structured, you have a bit of a play with some of the different ones and see what comes up best. So I'll hit that, and what that will actually do is now generate cut lines for the intersecting of these images. I'll let it run through the process so you get a bit of an idea how long it takes. So there's 11 images and it's up to intersect 7 now, onto 8. And 9, and it's working its way. So you can see it's doing a fair bit of work in the background. This is the second last intersect. And waiting. Okay, now it's generating the seam lines, which should only take a few moments with a bit of luck. Talk amongst yourselves. Okay, right, now you can see how it's intercut these particular images in such a way that it's actually removed the black edges of the photos that were previously there. And if I turn off this this tool up here, this is the actual shows the seam lines. We can now see just the imagery itself, and you'll see that there's variations in colour between the edges of this image and the ones around it, for example, which sort of stand out. So what we want to do is something about smoothing out that colour, and also there's a very sharp line there. You remember that before I clicked on this icon to generate the seam lines, when I selected overlap seamline function, it was a very simple menu. Now it gives you the option of doing some smoothing and feathering. I usually select both of these. I give them about a 10 metre overlap, and that will actually even out in the final processing these edges and smooth them over a 10 metre distance. The other thing we want to do is to do some colour correcting. I just usually use dodging, which is making the images paler, and colour balancing, and I just accept the defaults for those. You can go in and you can set different criteria for your imagery, but I'm finding that just using the defaults is fine. So we click OK to accept that. So now it's set to do image colour balancing, and it will do dodging, which is to lighten up these darker areas to match them with the surrounding images. You can also set digitize seams polygons and create holes and delete holes and all those sorts of things. I haven't had a great play with those. I don't think there's any great need to, but if you want to have an experiment, go for it. It might prove useful. So we've basically set our resample corrections to bilinear interpolation. We've done some color corrections. We've set our seam line function, and all of these things can actually be found on the toolbars using these functions and these ones here. This is your, I'll get a tooltip for you. Come on. Well, this is your grid sampling, bilinear interpretation. This is our resample options, as I showed you before. This one is your brightness and contrast tool, which I didn't show you before. This one is the one I just showed you with dodging and color balancing, so it's your color corrections. And this one is your smoothing and feathering, which I showed you before from the menu. So that's your major functions there. This starts the procedure to do the resampling, and if you're reasonably happy with what you have there, then you can actually go ahead and do that. I'm just trying to remember what this icon does. Okay, just shows the selected image. I'll turn that one off. What you can also find is that the program will also be set to have a certain number of default images displayed. Okay, so let's bring those images all back. We'll highlight them all down here, click and drag, and then click on our Make Selected Images Visible tool, and bingo, all they come back again. You'll also note down the bottom I've also placed ticks in the images dodged and colour balance boxes when I've used that sub-menu as well, so it gives you a bit of an idea about what's going on. There are a range of other columns across there that show various pieces of information, but for the very simple exercise of joining these particular areas together, that's all we need to do. So basically, this is the important tool to create your internal seam lines. Once you've done that, you'll get a slightly different submenu when you do your image edge boundaries and things like that. So what we'll do now is we'll actually run this process and create our mosaic image. And whilst I'm doing that, I'll pause the recording. But to run it, this is our little run icon. So I'll click on that, and that will run the mosaic process to disk. First thing you have to do, of course, is you have to give it an output file name, so we'll call it test1, and we'll put it in our C data folder. It's going to be an Imagine image. Click OK. Now it will go and commute the image statistics, which you'll see it's doing down the bottom of the screen. It'll run through that process, and if memory serves, it will then open up the process dialog. So I'll let it do this whilst it's the process is going on, so that if that dialog opens, I can show you what that looks like too. So it's obviously calculating the statistics for these multiple images, and it does that probably a little bit more quickly than it does when it's actually pulling them in and creating the pyramids and such. Okay, there's our process list. So it's actually started the mosaicing process now, calculates colours. Now this process for this number of images will probably take a few minutes. So what I'll do is I'll let it run through this, and I'll pause the recording, and when it's finished I'll come back again. Okay, that's taken about 45 minutes or more, so it takes quite a while to do this process. What I'll do now is find the actual source files and drag them into ERDAS Imagine to show you what the final product looks like. Okay, there it is. You'll see that the internal boundaries are still a little bit visible, but they're not as obvious as they were before. There's some areas where it's a bit more visible than others, and if you want to zoom in and have a look at the edges, you'll see how it's feathered the edges together in keeping with those settings that that I set before with the 10 meters of smoothing and feathering and such. So you'll see that the join through there is pretty good really. The actual rectification's not all that good in this particular images, but you'll see that the joins are pretty good. So depending on the accuracy of your rectifications, that's not a particularly good one. That's could be a bit better. But yeah, depending on the accuracy of your rectifications, the final product will be quite good. And if we zoom back out, you'll see that it's a much more usable product than what it would have been if we'd left the black margins on all of the images. Interestingly, you'll notice that the actual file name is test1, even though the image was set to be an IMG file. When it wrote it to disk, it wrote just a test1 with no file name extension. So if you scroll back through the video tutorial where you're naming it to test1, name it test1.img if you want to make sure that the image extension, IMG extension, is on the actual file name. And just to reiterate the differences between the before and after, here's our original image. Pardon me. And you'll see the differences between the boundaries in this image as opposed to the same boundaries in here. So it really does quite a nice job of smoothing out those edges and such. So that's a very brief introduction into using Mosaic Pro. This is Imagine 2014, but it's essentially the same principle and menu bars and such in 2011 to produce a much neater mosaic of several rectified images. Have fun experimenting and feed anything back if you think it's relevant to assist the resolution of the process for other people later on. Enjoy.